Welcome to the Chaos Sector. In today's investigative report, we have a brief intermission, even a group discussion regarding this case. We will examine the home in a moment, but for now let's simply relax. This is hard work, you know. Anyone care to start the discussion off?
Sure, I'll start it off. I have a question to everyone. What exactly was Gonzalez's dog doing during and after the attacks? Because it is reported that Koberger interacted with the dog in some manner. Are we to believe the dog just sat there, confused? And another question, wait, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that first.
From my previous analysis regarding the dog, I think the dog did bark during the attacks. I think the dog and what exactly happened regarding its behavior and activity will never be known. But from a general assumption, the dog perhaps was a bit intimidated. It wasn't a Rottweiler, you know. I still believe the dog should be presented in court as a reference. Although he would have had on a mask, the dog would detect him merely by physiology. In a scenario where Koberger is suspected of being the killer and no tangible evidence exists, that dog would perhaps be presented by the prosecution. But what if the defense demanded the dog to be presented? Interesting possibility, that could happen. But I want to look into something that we didn't discover. Apparently, Mortensen had communicated to her housemates during the attacks, believing they were, quote, partying. So, this would be around 4 a.m. on Sunday morning, in which she thought her peers were still partying, or simply having a good time. Well, let's weed out something interesting about this so-called belief she had. In the affidavit released, there is no mention of partying, or even her interacting with her peers that night. But in an article by none other than News Nation, apparently Mortensen was quite active during the stabbings. Ashley Banfield, updated February 9, 2023. Quote, a survivor of the University of Idaho killings allegedly thought the noise resulted from partying, asked the victims to quiet down, and mistook the killer as a guest, a source exclusively told News Nation. The source spoke directly with surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen, who allegedly yelled about the noises heard during the killings because she mistook it for partying. Mortensen allegedly first heard the noises around 4 a.m. She opened her door and yelled, quote, calm down, you're being too loud, and quote, I'm trying to sleep, unquote. She then closed her door and locked it, according to the source. Later in the night, Mortensen heard more loud noises, so she opened her door. She saw the killer walking down the hall, but she wasn't frightened. She assumed he was a guest of the other roommates there partying, according to the source. Unquote. Now hold everything, because more suspicion has sprouted out. If this information is factual, then why wasn't it included in the affidavit? Also, the description of who is alleged to be Koberger is completely different in this account. Mortensen was not frightened by him, as she believed he was a guest of her housemates, who she assumed was doing a bit of partying, right? How does it turn into, she witnessed a man dressed in all black, with a mask on, with bushy eyebrows, exiting the home? Also, if she assumed there was a party, wouldn't she at some point physically interact with her peers? Kernodle is across the hall. Chances are she would just knock on her door, to quote, chat a moment. Or whoever was assumed to be doing the partying. Let's say it was Mogan and Gonzalez upstairs, she would head upstairs, knock on the door, and ask, quote, who was that guy you had over? I'm trying to sleep, it's kinda late, unquote. But of course, she wouldn't be able to ask them this question, because they are both dead. The affidavit does not display the scenario, it mainly focuses on the suspect and the targets. But if Mortensen did in fact interact in this setting, does the killer just ignore that someone else is in the home? Wouldn't he panic a bit, because there is a chance that this person would create an unpredictable predicament? Think about this carefully. A killer enters the home, traveling to the 3rd floor, or the 2nd, and stabs one of the housemates. All of a sudden, someone is heard in another bedroom stating, quote, calm down, you're being loud, I'm trying to sleep, with an exclamation mark, unquote. She yelled this to her housemates, which would send the killer off into a panic mode. For one, they have just stabbed a housemate, for two, there are multiple people in the home, and third, one of those housemates just directed a statement to the very bedroom the killer is in. What if she comes into the bedroom where the noise was coming from and encountered the killer face to face? Surely a completely different scenario plays out. This is vital information, but I guess we're the only ones who will acknowledge it as such.
Nobody wants the truth to be revealed, that's why. In this scenario, the claim was Mortensen believed the person in all black was someone there for a party. Well, I'm not gonna say it's speculation or rumors, I'm just gonna display the article that claims so. Quote, it was only after she heard more noises that she opened her bedroom door and saw Brian Koberger walk out of the house, but believed him to be a partygoer, unquote. Quote, further information regarding the Idaho murders included Ethan Chapin's sister-in-law, revealing that Mortensen had called all of the housemates after she heard screaming and crying coming from their upstairs rooms. Unquote. Now wait one important damn minute. This information is extremely vital to the case, right? Of course, we see the shady activity once again. This was never publicized, none of it. Let me explain why this was omitted. It's obvious, but I'll do it anyway. First of all, there is a conflation between seeing what is depicted as a creepy individual and seeing someone who Mortensen believed was a partygoer. If Mortensen believed that the individual was there for a party, what party exactly is she referring to? Because they had already done their partying hours prior, right? And also, how could she believe this, when the individual is dressed in all black, with a freaking mask over his face? He didn't say anything to her, just walked out of the home. That is not someone there for a party, that's someone there who is dangerous. Which one was it? What is the actual state of mind and belief of the survivor here? Mortensen's affidavit also doesn't claim she called her peers during that time frame. Why would this not be a key element in the affidavit being unsealed? I think you're starting to see why. If she called her peers, which would be during the time frame they are being stabbed to death, and nobody obviously answered, wouldn't this mean she would check everything out? I see her becoming even more agitated, thinking they're ignoring her, right? They're not asleep, so she would physically go to the bedroom responsible for the noise. And this is when she spotted the, you know what, I've mentally checked out, again. Nope, can't do it.
I got it, my friend, let's keep our cool. It's been a while since I reported on this case, and since I've been gone, more nonsense has reached my desk. Let me pick up where my colleague left off. Mortensen did either one or two things during that time frame, right? She heard her peers, assuming they were just hanging out, and didn't think much of it. More noise is heard, in which she looks out to check if everything is okay. Then she allegedly hears crying and a male's voice in the home. Upon opening her door for the last time, she spots that man walk past her, exiting the home. This was what we all obtained in the affidavit. But if that scenario was completely different, then the last accounts can't be what happened. If she actually communicated with her peers, as they were making a lot of noise, then everything that allegedly followed would make Mortensen a bit agitated. Whichever room had the noise, Mortensen would head to personally tell her peers to quiet down, right? Remember, she is depicted as being a bit agitated to begin with the exclamation mark on her statement to her peers. Okay, now we have a completely different circumstance, and, the most important change, a completely different state of Mortensen herself, physically. She would be dead, in this scenario. Or at least suffered serious stab wounds. Mortensen encounters the killer, literally stabbing her friends, she screams, he reacts, and then stabs her, either seriously injuring her, or murdering her. But of course, she was never stabbed, and she's still alive to give her accounts of what happened. Even in the scenario where she didn't physically go to any of the bedrooms, the claim states she called her housemates, after she heard screaming and crying. They obviously didn't answer, so what would be the next decision she makes here? Oh, they never explain what she did next. This only magnifies the strange behavior of Mortensen not calling the authorities. If she was in hot water just off the fact she didn't call the authorities anyway, she's literally in scalding hot water, knowing the circumstances in this scenario. Let me stay right here and envision this predicament. Now I notice it states she heard screaming. This was not in the affidavit, only the crying and whimpers. But now, screaming has been added? So Mortensen has heard what we know she heard anyway, but it was kept out of the affidavit to change the setting in the home. If you hear screams and cries, you call the authorities when you get a chance, plain and simple. No paranoia about drugs in the home, or any of that.
I know people speculated that some of them were on drugs, but yeah, dangers in the home take priority over being scared about authorities finding them. Unless, she would feel that the presence of drugs could be used as a possible link to being a suspect, right?
Perhaps. But that would be very cerebral for her to think that, if we go with the narrative that she wasn't involved. Instincts would provoke her to call for help and think about all of the criminal elements later. An alleged drug addict wouldn't fear calling authorities after discovering their friends were stabbed to death. Instinctively, Mortensen would have to know her friends were in danger after spotting the man in black, right? She observed the man in black and then locked herself in her bedroom despite hearing screams and crying? Also calling her friends, and they didn't respond? Did she try calling them again when she locked herself in the bedroom? There are two scenarios with bits and pieces merged together, which indicates dishonesty. You can't have both elements of each scenario actually happen, because they have different outcomes. As we mentioned early on, this does not bode well for her.
I agree, but unfortunately, I don't think this will ever be a factor. She is clearly hiding vital information of what really happened. I'll dig a bit deeper into that take. In the affidavit, there is no mention of Mortensen hearing screams, nor any accounts of her calling her friends during that time frame. I think this is what she originally told the authorities, which obviously has a different setting in the home. But the authorities chose to omit that account because there would be too many questions as to what really happened. They exist anyway, but definitely if she was in communication with her peers, and also heard one of them screaming. If it is in the affidavit, surely the mainstream media didn't report it to the public, so basically it doesn't exist. That's important information, you don't leave that out, unless you have an agenda. Of course. You heard screams, you call to see what's going on, later you see a stranger leaving the home, the next move would be to check on your peers. Can't have this be her account, because she would have to call the authorities, around 4:30 a.m. So they quote, redacted her statements, and painted a scenario where she wasn't aware of any danger, and somehow fell asleep, coincidentally around the time she should be, or did, check on her peers. Wow. Friends will always look out for each other, and if she heard screams and cries, there is no way she wouldn't go check on her friends. At least if you're scared, lock yourself in the bedroom, and call 911. Why was this so hard to do, even before discovering the bodies? That's what created the suspicion in the first place. If she had called 911, we wouldn't have the suspicion, at least at face value. But I think it was all about calculated timing and activity. She couldn't call the cops at the time we expected her to, because that would jeopardize someone's, or a group's, ability to actually get away without a trace. Time needed to pass before the call was made. And Mortensen didn't even call the cops, it was individuals who came over. So throughout the entire night, into the morning, she never called the cops? She is assumed to have passed out, we believe once she discovered her deceased friends, right? Well, this would mean she had discovered them initially, before, I repeat, before she called friends over, right? All of a sudden, she passes out once others are there? Why didn't she pass out upon discovering her deceased friends? Do you realize how devastating that experience would be in real time? She would pass out upon observing such a horrific scene. But she didn't, it was later, after she had come to grips with reality? I'm not buying that whatsoever. What do you guys think? Is she a suspect or what?
Yeah, she is, there's no way around it. Come to think about it, without the so-called DNA of Koberger at the crime scene, she's more of a suspect than he is. I know that may rub some people the wrong way, but we're looking at entirely too many cracks in her foundation. Also, it was never confirmed that Mortensen physically discovered the peers, right? But she had to discover them, because she called her friends over because of it. News Nation, oh my fucking days, you know, I'm gonna just not mention them and show their so-called reports from now. They claim that a source close to the investigation told them, yes, that media outlet, that Ethan Chapin and Zana Kernodle's bodies were first found by his best friend, that being Chapin. He checked their pulses before speaking to a 911 dispatcher. These so-called sources are also getting on my nerves because they aren't identified, we don't know the credibility of their claims without any actual confirmation, they're just out and about making claims that something happened or something was stated. But Mortensen is literally in the bedroom across the hall, and you're telling us she never went into the bedroom? When did those friends arrive at the home? Around 8 a.m. according to individuals who received phone calls, and these are actual students. That's an actual source, damn it. From 4:30 a.m. to 8 a.m., are they suggesting that Mortensen never checked on anything? No sir, it won't pass the bar, not at the chaos sector. But this is why she's a suspect. Even if she wasn't directly involved, she committed an actual felony. Do you know what that is? Obstruction of justice. Yes, we give her a pass during the time frame of not calling the authorities early on, but once she discovered those dead bodies, she committed a felony of obstruction of justice. Say what you will about her being shocked, scared, not sure of what to do, but it won't fly. Because she had the wherewithal to call her friends over about those dead bodies, and that is where obstruction of justice comes into play. Meaning, she can't rely on the element of quote, being frozen in a shocked state, no ma'am. That decision to call friends over, instead of the authorities, indicates there is suspicious activity, or even a motive, to why go that route first. So yeah, I've always believed she was a suspect, and now it's even more evident.
Yeah, I would have to concur with that breakdown. It's about her actions, and as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. In this case, an affidavit. The words of that affidavit depict her as a delicate college student who experienced a very traumatic event. But her actions don't coincide with that delicate depiction. Your friends are in danger, and if we go even further, she would have checked on those friends after the stranger walked past her. She discovers a bloody nightmare and perhaps faints. Now that is more believable, right? Witnessing your friends lying on the floor in a pool of blood, that would make someone be in a, quote, frozen and shocked state, as the affidavit claims. It's obvious here that authorities altered Mortensen's accounts of what happened to eliminate her from being aware of danger in the home. And that leads to all types of problems. Now it's easy to write all of this off as speculation. But News Nation apparently obtained a statement from a source, perhaps a private investigator, getting tired of those, but they reported that this was a part of Mortensen's accounts. Also, they may have not realized how devastating those statements were at the time. Heck, Mortensen didn't realize it for sure. Everyone was focused on the victims, and eventually the primary suspect in Bryan Kohberger. But truth will come out, without you even realizing it. Guilt, in some form, makes a person say something that they don't realize is problematic, or even a sign of guilt. You can incriminate yourself without knowing you did it, because your brain is formulating a presumed logical reason, which you are convinced is in fact logical, but actually proves you are guilty of a crime. Funny, isn't it? Mortensen stating she called her friends after hearing screaming and crying in her brain is logical because it's her showing concern. Once again, in her brain. She produces a presumed logical reason, which indicates she wasn't unaware of activity in the home, but wasn't sure of any particular danger in the home neither. But the incriminating part is the point in which she would have to check when nobody answered those phone calls. Remember, they were awake, so when they didn't answer, this would lead to concern. And then spotting an intruder really magnifies her concerns. Mortensen can't believe it was a, quote, partygoer, because she heard screaming and crying prior, and then an intruder dressed in all black with a mask walks past her. So in this setting, she's either dead, where she can't even provide an account of what she witnessed, or she is severely wounded, in which her accounts of what happened would obviously be totally different. What I gather here is lies are mixed with truth, but it doesn't matter at this point which is which, because we already know Mortensen was aware of the murders in real time. How do I come to this conclusion? Because there were screams. That alone creates danger in the home. I've returned and picked up where I left off, exposing the suspicious, unreliable, and even fabricated accounts of Mortensen.
Well, look at that, there is always something wacky coming out the woodworks in this case, right? I had another inquiry that I feel needs a bit of attention here. Kaylee Gonzalez did not reside at that home anymore. She had moved to the state of Texas at some point. She was assumed to be graduating early and was heading back to Texas. There is hearsay, which I don't really care for, but everything has some element of truth with hearsay. There is a theory that the killer, or killers, knew this about Kaylee and wasn't gonna let her leave alive. A breakup, 3 weeks before she was murdered. 5 years is a long time for young people. There is so much invested into that relationship, and often, that is your first love. He couldn't let her go, to the point it drove him mad. Heartbreak can either make you stronger, or destroy you. I'll just leave that here to ponder.
Yeah, there was also a theory that this was revenge for a former roommate, who had overdosed. The claim is that the young lady was being bullied, to the point she decided to take her own life, by overdosing on prescription drugs. The friends of this young lady planned the revenge, and sure enough, we know what happened. I think it's worth acknowledging, because this young lady apparently was a roommate with one of the housemates prior. I believe it was Madison Mogan. College students often have very shallow personalities, and the element of bullying does ring true in such settings. But I think it's best to leave this theory to the side, for now at least. From what I've researched, this young lady is a real person, and did attend the University of Idaho. As far as being roommates with one of the victims, we can't verify that. But the mainstream media will never accept anything contrary to their guy. It's deemed disrespectful and tasteless.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, but I guess it's just another quote, crazy conspiracy theory. It is rumored that this was all about drug money. In a nutshell, drug money had been lost, and someone had to pay the price. The rumor is the housemates dumped about $250,000 worth of drugs, and it angered the drug lord. To make an example, the ones responsible for this were murdered. I know, we don't want to venture too deep into these theories, but there was that interview with the mother of the Washington State student, who claimed there was a drug dynamic involved. Even the male student who was interviewed echoed the element of drug use in that home. And it is obvious that the home was the place for parties, right? We've seen the body cam footage of the Moscow PD being called to that home for noise complaints. Typical college behavior, but if there was a darker world within those walls, where drugs were trafficked in and out of, this changes everything. From suspects, motives, and what everyone in the neighborhood would know. Wait a minute, interesting. I noticed that the only camera that has been reported on, and physically seen, is in fact the next-door neighbors. Could it be that this neighboring home surveilled everyone who came into that area, making sure they provide security detail for the drug dealers? Just my thoughts, because in my view, there is a motive based on close encounters.
Although none of this obviously has been confirmed, these theories have more logic and motives than an individual who hasn't been linked to anyone in that home. Reports claim he was stalking one of the victims, but there hasn't been any proof of it. Reports claim there is digital evidence, where he contacted one of the victims on social media, yet it hasn't been verified. Yet, a devastated lover, or vengeance due to loss of drug profits, has direct and plausible motives. But I think we can all honestly say, for a fact, the investigation was flooded with misdirection, unconfirmed claims about the suspect, and no actual evidence confirmed. The authorities, nor the FBI, verified that Koberger stalked one of the victims. And if we refer to the claim of a home invasion, this really puts the spotlight on everything. If they have lied, yes, lied about Koberger breaking into a friend's home, yet the friend was never interviewed, and there wasn't a charge for home invasion, conspiracy, stalking, any of this nonsense, what makes you think the claim he stalked one of the victims could be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you think the claims they have digital evidence, showing Koberger contacting Gonzalez on social media, can be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you think claims of him spotted near that home 12 times prior, can be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you think him spotted near that home the night of the murders, can be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you think the claims they spotted Koberger in surveillance at a grocery store, hours later of the night of the murders, can be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you think they found his DNA in the home, can be trusted? And if this can't be trusted, what makes you— Okay, you catch my drift. We are only pointing out everything that creates this analysis. We'll leave you with this scenario. Mortensen spots a stranger in the home, and locks herself in the bedroom, falls asleep, while 4 of her friends lie in pools of blood. Someone's spirit would literally wake her up, telling her to check on her friends. Meaning, there is no way she would not know they were murdered, soon after it had happened. And trust me, that's only giving her the benefit of the doubt. Which I shouldn't do. Until next time, this is the Chaos Sector.